Straightened her jacket, and faced the judge with confidence that didn't belong to her. "The yacht is mine," she said, "and the penthouse as well. She has no claim to either." Every head turned toward me. I didn't move, I didn't speak, I didn't even look at her. At that moment, I understood something clearly for the first time. This wasn't about inheritance. This wasn't about money. This was about erasing me from a story I helped build. And the saddest part? She truly believed she had already won. My name is Elena Carter, and I was 31 years old when my own sister tried to take everything from me in open court. The judge adjusted his glasses and glanced down at the documents in front of him. My sister's lawyer stood beside her, calm, rehearsed, almost bored as if the outcome had already been decided. Their confidence filled the room like thick smoke. I sat at the defendant's table alone. No dramatics. No whispering lawyer leaning in to reassure me. Just my hands folded neatly on my lap and my eyes fixed on the seal behind the judge's bench. People often think silence means weakness. In that courtroom, silence was the only power I had chosen to keep. My sister Victoria was everything I was not: outspoken, polished, magnetic. She knew how to command attention, how to turn a room in her favor. Growing up, she was always the one adults listened to first. The one teachers believed. The one relatives trusted instinctively. I was the other one. The quiet one. The one who stayed late, cleaned up messes, and signed papers without asking for applause. So, when Victoria claimed the yacht, our late father's pride, and the penthouse overlooking the marina, no one seemed surprised. Not the spectators. Not the attorneys. Not even the court clerk typing every word without looking up. What they didn't see was what sat beneath that silence. They didn't see the years I spent handling accounts, reviewing contracts, managing legal details while my sister enjoyed the visibility. They didn't hear the private conversations, the careful instructions, the warnings wrapped in calm voices. And they certainly didn't know why I wasn't defending myself. As Victoria finished speaking, she glanced back at me, just briefly. There was no anger in her eyes, only certainty. The kind that comes from believing someone else has already done the fighting for you. I met her gaze then, for the first time that morning. Not with fear, not with resentment, but with the quiet understanding that the truth doesn't rush. It waits. And soon, it would speak through someone far more powerful than either of us. Victoria and I grew up in the same house, but we did not grow up in the same world. She was 3 years older, tall and confident even as a child. The kind of girl who spoke before thinking and was rewarded for it anyway. Teachers smiled at her. Relatives leaned in when she talked. When she laughed, people noticed. When she cried, rooms shifted to comfort her. I learned early how to disappear without leaving. I was the one who stayed in the background, reading quietly while adults discussed money, travel, and plans for the future. I listened more than I spoke. Not because I was shy, but because I understood something instinctively: attention was a currency, and Victoria already had plenty. Someone had to handle what came after the talking stopped. Our parents built their wealth carefully. My father was disciplined to the point of obsession, my mother meticulous and patient. They believed in preparation, in structure, in doing things properly even when no one was watching. The yacht came later, after years of careful investments. The penthouse followed: glass walls, white stone floors, a view of the marina that felt unreal when the sun hit the water just right. To the outside world, it looked like success had arrived overnight. Inside our family, it felt like pressure. Victoria loved the lifestyle. She thrived in it. She hosted gatherings on the yacht, invited friends to the penthouse, posted photos that made everything look effortless. She became the face of our family without ever being asked. I became something else. While Victoria traveled, I stayed back to review paperwork. While she celebrated milestones, I learned the language of contracts and tax filings. When our parents needed someone to sit beside them during meetings with lawyers and advisors, they called me not because I was louder, but because I was careful. I didn't resent that role. I respected it. My father used to say, "Someone has to know where every key is kept." And without ever saying it directly, that someone became me. As years passed, the imbalance hardened into expectation. Victoria expected the spotlight. I expected responsibility. No one questioned it because it worked, until it didn't. When our parents died within 18 months of each other, the house felt suddenly too quiet. The yacht sat unused at the marina. The penthouse lights stayed off for weeks at a time. Grief doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it settles in and rearranges everything without asking permission. The will was incomplete. Not careless, but deliberately restrained. Assets were placed into structures designed to protect them, not divide them immediately. It was meant to slow things down, to give time for clarity. Victoria saw delay as denial. She wanted answers, ownership, control. I wanted process. Those differences, once manageable, turned into fault lines. At first, it was small things. She asked for access, just temporarily. She referred to the yacht as hers in casual conversation. She spoke to real estate agents without consulting me. Each time, I reminded her gently that there were steps to follow. She smiled when I said it, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "You're overthinking it," she told me once, standing in the penthouse living room, arms crossed as sunlight poured in behind her. "You've always done that." Maybe I had. Or maybe I understood that wealth without boundaries invites the wrong kind of confidence. What Victoria never understood, what she never wanted to understand, was that visibility and ownership are not the same thing. Applause does not replace documentation, and presence does not equal authority. By the time lawyers became involved, our relationship had already shifted. We weren't sisters navigating loss anymore. We were opposing interpretations of the same legacy. She believed inheritance was about who looked like they belonged. I believed it was about who had been trusted when no one else was watching. And somewhere between those beliefs, a courtroom was waiting. Betrayal doesn't always arrive with raised voices or slammed doors. Sometimes it arrives quietly wrapped in smiles, disguised as confidence, justified as necessity. The first time I realized something was wrong, it wasn't dramatic. It was an email. A marina invoice, forwarded to me late at night, marked urgent. The charges were unfamiliar fuel, crew overtime, private catering. I hadn't approved any of it. When I checked the dates, my chest tightened. The yacht had been taken out for an entire weekend. By Victoria, without a word. I called her the next morning, keeping my voice calm. She laughed lightly, as if I'd asked something silly. "I needed a break," she said. "You know how heavy things have been." Heavy, as if grief entitled her to possession. I reminded her gently that there were procedures. That the estate was still in transition. That nothing was supposed to be used or moved without joint agreement. "You're acting like a gatekeeper," she replied, her tone sharpening just enough to sting. "It's family property, Elena. Stop treating it like a corporate asset." That was the first shift. The first time she framed my responsibility as obstruction. After that, the pattern formed quickly. She stopped asking and started informing. Then she stopped informing altogether. I heard from a friend that Victoria had hosted a party on the yacht, champagne, music, strangers laughing against a backdrop that still smelled faintly of our father's cologne. Someone tagged the location online. I didn't see the post myself. I didn't need to. The message was clear. She was claiming space. Publicly. The penthouse came next. I found out when a real estate agent called me, confused. He asked which one of us had authority to discuss a potential listing. He said Victoria had mentioned early interest and wanted preliminary numbers. I remember sitting at my desk, phone pressed to my ear, staring at a document I had helped prepare months earlier, a document she clearly hadn't read. "There's no listing," I said carefully. "And there won't be." The agent apologized. Victoria didn't. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. She crossed her arms and leaned against the marble counter in the penthouse kitchen, sunlight catching the glass behind her like a stage light. "I'm being practical," she said. "You're being difficult." That word again. Difficult. She said it the way people do when they want silence, not solutions. I tried to explain again that control was conditional, that ownership wasn't implied, that everything had been structured intentionally to prevent exactly this kind of behavior. She rolled her eyes. "You always hide behind paperwork," she said. "Dad wouldn't have wanted this. He trusted me." That hurt more than I expected. Because it wasn't true. My father trusted precision. He trusted patience. He trusted the person who didn't confuse confidence with entitlement. And deep down, Victoria knew that. Which was why she stopped arguing facts and started rewriting history. The next move was colder. I was removed from access. Passwords changed. Accounts frozen. Notices sent to me by third parties, not by my own sister. When I asked her directly, she didn't deny it. She didn't apologize either. I needed to simplify things, she said. Too many voices. Too many voices, as if mine had ever been loud. It was then I understood. This wasn't about misunderstanding. This was about control. About testing how far she could go before I pushed back. And she expected me to push back loudly. She expected anger. Accusations. A fight she could frame as emotional instability. I gave her none of that. I documented everything. The invoices, the emails, the agent calls, the access changes. I kept my responses brief and professional. I asked questions I already knew the answers to. She mistook my restraint for surrender. By the time legal letters arrived, she was already telling people the story her way, that I had been helping, that I was confused, that she was simply stepping in to manage things more efficiently. And when she finally said it out loud, when she looked at me across a polished table and said, "You were never meant to own any of this," I realized something had been lost forever. Not the yacht. Not the penthouse. The assumption that blood alone protects you from greed. By then, the court date was inevitable. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what she would say in front of a judge. I was curious, because everything she believed she had taken, she had only borrowed. And the terms were about to be enforced. There is a kind of preparation that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't look like strategy meetings or dramatic phone calls. It doesn't involve threats or ultimatums. It happens quietly, over time, through habits that other people mistake for passivity. That was the kind of preparation I had been doing for years. Long before my sister began hosting parties on the yacht or speaking to agents about the penthouse, I had learned to read documents the way some people read faces. I noticed what was said, and more importantly, what was not. I paid attention to clauses buried at the bottom of pages, to conditions written in careful language meant to slow impulsive decisions. My parents taught me that. They never sat me down and said, "This is your role." They didn't need to. When my father brought home drafts from his attorney, he handed them to me first, not because I was the eldest, but because I didn't skim. I asked questions. I circled phrases. I noticed patterns. When my mother organized records, she let me sit beside her, labeling folders, separating what was essential from what was sentimental. "Don't rush clarity," she used to say. "It comes when you're patient enough to wait for it." The structures they put in place were not accidental. They were protective. Trusts, conditional access, layered authority mechanisms designed to outlast emotion, to survive grief, anger, and exactly the kind of entitlement my sister now displayed so openly. Ownership was never meant to be obvious. Control was never meant to be loud. Victoria never liked that. She preferred what could be seen. So when she began moving fast, changing passwords, freezing accounts, speaking in absolutes, I recognized it for what it was. Not strength, exposure. Every unauthorized charge, every skipped procedure, every assumption she made without verification created a record. A trail she didn't know she was leaving because she believed confidence replaced consent. It doesn't. I didn't confront her. I didn't warn her. I didn't even correct her publicly when she misrepresented facts. I let her speak. I let her act. I let her assume silence meant absence. At night I organized. I printed statements. I saved timestamps. I cross-referenced communications. I requested copies of documents I already knew existed, letting third parties confirm details in writing. I asked neutral questions that produced clear answers. All of it without urgency, without emotion. I remembered something my father once told me after watching a business partner unravel under pressure. People reveal themselves when they think no one is checking. Victoria revealed everything. She revealed how little she understood the systems she wanted to control, how easily she confused visibility with authority, how quickly she dismissed safeguards as inconveniences. What she never realized was that those safeguards had names, dates, signatures. And one signature, in particular, mattered more than any of the others. Mine. Not because I demanded it. Because my parents had trusted it. When the legal letters arrived, I read them carefully, line by line. They were aggressive, confident, and incomplete, built on assumptions rather than evidence, the kind of documents written to intimidate rather than persuade. I didn't respond immediately. I forwarded them to the attorney who had helped draft the original structures years earlier. He didn't sound surprised when he called me back. "She's moving too fast," he said simply. "That usually means she doesn't know what she's standing on." That was when I knew the court case wasn't a threat. It was a correction. I wasn't preparing to fight my sister. I was preparing to let the truth surface in the only place that couldn't be swayed by personality or volume. A courtroom. Victoria thought the story belonged to whoever told it first. She never considered the possibility that the ending had already been written quietly, carefully, and beyond her reach. And while she gathered confidence, I gathered proof. By the time we stood before a judge, everything she claimed was already documented. She just didn't know it yet. The shift in the courtroom didn't happen when my sister spoke. It happened when the judge stopped her. He raised one hand, palm outward, not harshly, just enough to quiet the momentum she had been building since the moment she stood up. Victoria froze mid-sentence, her confidence flickering for the first time. "Let's slow this down," the judge said. "I want to see the ownership documents." Her lawyer nodded, already standing, already prepared. He approached the bench with a slim folder, neat and polished. Too neat. The kind of folder meant to suggest finality. I watched without moving. The judge flipped through the pages, his expression unreadable. He paused, then frowned slightly. He turned a page back, then another forward. "These appear to be usage records," he said. "Not ownership." Victoria shifted beside her attorney. Just slightly. Enough for me to notice. Her lawyer cleared his throat. "Your Honor, the intent of the estate." "I didn't ask about intent," the judge interrupted calmly. "I asked about title." The room went quiet again. He looked up. "Miss Carter," he said, turning to me for the first time. "Do you have documentation?" I stood. Not dramatically. Not hurriedly. I walked to the bench with a single binder in my hands, thicker than the one my sister's lawyer had presented. Labeled, tabbed, worn not from age, but from use. I handed it to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. "This contains the trust agreements, amendments, and authorization records," I said evenly, "including signatures and dates." "Infens underst." Victoria laughed under her breath. A short, dismissive sound, the kind meant to signal superiority. The judge opened the binder. He didn't read it quickly. He read it carefully. Page by page, tab by tab. Minutes passed, long ones. I could feel the weight of the room shift not toward me, but away from certainty. The judge stopped again, this time longer. He adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. "This trust," he said slowly, "lists a sole trustee." He looked up at me. "Is that you?" "Yes, Your Honor." Victoria's head snapped toward me. "What?" she said too loudly. "That's not—" The judge raised his hand again. Silence returned instantly. "She is the sole trustee," he continued, "with full authority over the assets in question, including the yacht and the penthouse." My sister's lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently. Papers rustled. A pen dropped to the floor. Victoria shook her head, disbelief replacing confidence. "That doesn't make sense," she said. "I'm the beneficiary." The judge nodded. "You are, conditionally." He turned another page. "Those conditions include restrictions on unilateral use, attempted sale, and misrepresentation of authority." He paused. "And violations trigger suspension of beneficiary privileges." The room exhaled as one. I hadn't spoken again. I didn't need to. Everything was there. In ink, in signatures, in dates my sister had never bothered to check. The judge looked directly at Victoria now. "Based on these records," he said, "your actions constitute multiple violations of the trust." Her lawyer finally stood again, but this time without confidence. "Your Honor, we weren't aware of—" "That's clear," the judge replied. Victoria's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The story she had rehearsed about fairness, about family, about what she deserved, collapsed under the weight of facts she had never bothered to learn. I watched her then, not with satisfaction, not with anger, with clarity. This wasn't a victory. It was a correction. The judge closed the binder. "These documents speak for themselves," he said, "and they speak very clearly." He set the binder aside and looked at me once more. His expression wasn't approving or sympathetic. It was professional. "The court recognizes Miss Elena Carter as the controlling authority over the assets in dispute." Victoria stared straight ahead, unblinking. For the first time since this began, she had nothing to say. And for the first time, my silence was no longer mistaken for weakness. It had become the loudest thing in the room. The courtroom did not erupt after the judge spoke. There were no gasps, no whispers, no sudden movement. What followed was heavier than noise. A stillness that pressed against the walls and forced everyone to sit with what they had just heard. Victoria remained standing, frozen, her confidence draining from her posture. Her lawyer leaned toward her, whispering urgently, but she did not answer. Her eyes stayed fixed on the bench, as if rereading the moment might reveal a different ending hidden between the lines. "This can't be right," she finally said, her voice thinner now. "I was never told any of this." The judge replied calmly, almost gently. "Being uninformed," he explained, "did not invalidate a legal structure. It only explained why the case existed at all." Her lawyer tried once more. He spoke of intentions, of grief, of a sister acting in good faith. He suggested confusion rather than misconduct. The judge listened without interruption, then shook his head. "Good faith requires awareness," he said. "Authority requires verification." It's complicated. Each sentence stripped another layer from the story Victoria had built so carefully. The confident sister, the rightful heir, the one stepping in to take control while others hesitated. What remained was smaller and far more fragile. She had mistaken access for ownership, assumption for entitlement, confidence for truth. Victoria's hands trembled as she pressed them against the table. Her shoulders curved inward, as if the room itself had grown heavier. For the first time, she did not look angry or defiant. She looked lost. She turned toward me then. I felt her gaze before I met it. There was something almost pleading in her eyes, a silent request for rescue, as if sisterhood could override structure, as if emotion could rewrite ink. I did not look away. But I did not step forward either. This moment no longer belonged to us. It belonged to the consequences she had ignored. The judge reviewed his notes and spoke again, firmer now. The court found a clear pattern of disregard for the trust's conditions. Accordingly, beneficiary privileges would be suspended pending review. Victoria inhaled sharply. Her lawyer closed his folder. There was nothing left to argue. I stayed seated as the weight of the ruling settled over the room. Emails, calls, assumptions, and shortcuts collapsed into what they always were: unsupported actions. I felt no triumph, only relief. Not because I had won, but because I had not lost myself trying to fight her. The collapse was not loud or theatrical. It was quiet and unavoidable, the kind that happens when certainty finally meets consequence. Victoria gathered her belongings without looking at me again. For the first time in her life, there was no audience applauding her confidence. Only the echo of choices she made when she believed no one was checking, and a silence she could no longer control. It settled there, final and undeniable, marking the end of illusion and the beginning of accountability for everyone involved in that room. Authority doesn't come from volume, it comes from clarity, and his words were clear enough to leave no room for interpretation. The yacht and the penthouse would remain under the control of the trust. I would continue as trustee. Victoria's beneficiary privileges were suspended, effective immediately, due to repeated violations of the trust's conditions. There was no dramatic pause, no flourish, just finality. The judge looked at me briefly as he spoke, not with approval or sympathy, but with the neutrality of someone whose job was not to comfort, only to conclude. Then, he turned to my sister and reminded her firmly that the ruling was not a punishment, it was enforcement. That distinction mattered to me, because I had not come to court to take something from her, I had come to stop something from being taken from me. Victoria's lawyer asked if I wished to pursue damages. lost revenue, legal fees, misuse of assets. The list was long, and the law would have allowed it. I shook my head. No, I said quietly. I'm not asking for that. The word hung in the room. Unexpected. I could feel my sister's surprise without looking at her. Perhaps she had prepared herself for humiliation, for retaliation, for the kind of revenge stories people expect when blood turns against blood. But this was not about humiliation. It was about boundaries. The judge nodded once, noting my decision for the record. He reminded both of us that the trust existed to protect the estate, not to destroy relationships. Whether it could still do the latter was not his concern. Court adjourned. That was it. No speeches. No victory laps. No satisfaction carved into someone else's loss. As people stood and gathered their belongings, I remained seated for a moment longer, letting the silence settle. Justice, I realized, is often quieter than anger. It doesn't demand applause. It doesn't need witnesses to feel real. It simply restores balance. I had not taken everything. I had not stripped my sister of dignity. I had not rewritten the past or punished her for wanting more than she was entitled to. I had only allowed the truth to stand where it belonged, and for the first time since this began, that was enough. I walked out of the courtroom alone. The hallway felt brighter than before. Sunlight spilling through tall windows, dust drifting like something unsettled. Lawyers hurried past with phones to their ears. For them, it was another case. For me, time slowed. Behind me, my sister said my name once. Elena. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. Looking back wouldn't have meant forgiveness. It would have reopened a door I had finally closed. I had spent years explaining myself to someone who never wanted to listen. That chapter ended when the judge spoke. Outside, the air felt lighter. Not because I had won, but because I had released a burden that never belonged to me. Guilt for protecting what was entrusted to my care. Justice, I learned, is rarely loud. It doesn't need speeches or applause. It feels like alignment, like things returning to their proper places. The yacht remained at the marina. The penthouse still overlooked the water. Nothing appeared different, yet everything was. The story attached to those assets no longer belonged to the loudest voice in the room. It belonged to the truth, written quietly and enforced without anger. I thought of my parents and how they prepared without announcing it. They trusted process over personality. They taught me that responsibility doesn't seek attention, and protection doesn't ask permission. They never said I would need to stand against my own sister to honor that trust, but they gave me what I needed. Justice without revenge leaves room for peace, not reconciliation, peace. The kind that comes from knowing you did not become what tried to break you. I didn't ask the court to punish my sister beyond necessity. I didn't need her humiliation to feel whole. I needed boundaries restored. Family can test you in ways strangers never will. They know your history and your values, and sometimes they mistake that knowledge for permission. It isn't. Preparation matters. Silence can be strength. Clarity outlasts noise. I reached my car and sat quietly before starting the engine. No one followed me. The world didn't mark the moment. But I did. Walking away clean doesn't mean leaving with nothing. It means leaving with yourself intact, steady, and finally at peace. That is the quiet lesson I carry forward. Protect what is entrusted, choose restraint over spectacle, and remember that dignity survives storms when patience, preparation, and truth are allowed to lead with clarity, courage, and calm resolve intact. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to support this channel. We share true-to-life stories about family, boundaries, justice, and quiet strength stories meant to make you think, not just react. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter, and turn on notifications to stay connected. Your comments matter here. Share your thoughts, your experiences, or the lessons you've learned along the way. By subscribing, you help this channel grow and reach others who need these stories. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for being part of this community. Together, we build understanding, empathy, patience, and perspective.